The first miscarriage happened on a Tuesday. I remember because I was wearing my blue dress, the one with the daisies along the hem that I'd bought for the kindergarten graduation ceremony I was supposed to attend that afternoon. I'd been nauseous all morning, but nausea was normal. Nausea was my baseline. Nausea, fatigue, migraines that felt like someone tightening a vise behind my left eye. These were the weather patterns of my body, so constant I'd stopped questioning them. I was 28. I'd been married to Ethan for 3 years. And I was standing in our bathroom, watching blood bloom across the daisies like a slow-motion horror film, when I realized I was losing the only thing I'd ever wanted that didn't require anyone else's permission. Ethan was at work. I called him 3 times. He answered on the 4th, breathless, already annoyed. "Nora, I'm in a meeting, is this an emergency?" And when I told him, there was a pause. Then, okay, I'll call my mother, she'll know what to do. His mother, Eleanor. The sainted Eleanor, who'd raised 3 children alone after her husband left, who volunteered at the church food pantry, who brought casseroles to grieving neighbors and remembered everyone's birthday. The woman who had, within 6 months of our wedding, taken over my kitchen, my calendar, and my husband's emergency contact list. She arrived within 20 minutes. She held me while I cried. She cleaned the dress. "Don't worry about the stains, darling. I have a solution for everything," and she made me tea that tasted like copper and licorice. And she told me, with the gentle authority of a woman who had never been questioned, that these things happened. That my body was just adjusting. That I was young, that there would be others, that I needed to rest and let her take care of me. I let her. God help me, I let her. That was the first time. There would be a second, 2 years later. And between them, 8 years of migraines that left me in dark rooms, of fatigue so profound I'd fall asleep sitting up, of brain fog that made me forget the names of children I'd taught for months. I saw 4 doctors. I had blood tests, MRI, a sleep study that showed nothing because I couldn't sleep in strange rooms. I was told it was stress, anxiety, the pressure of trying to conceive. One endocrinologist, a kind man with a beard that smelled like pipe tobacco, mentioned my thyroid levels were slightly elevated, not enough to treat, but worth monitoring. I mentioned it to Eleanor. She made me a smoothie the next morning. It tasted like almonds and obligation. I never connected the two. Why would I? Eleanor was the person who showed up when no one else did. She was the one who drove me to the hospital when the migraines made me vomit. She was the one who told Ethan to be patient with me when I was too tired for intimacy, too foggy for conversation, too broken to be the wife he'd signed up for. She was the solution. She was always the solution, until she wasn't. Welcome to Little Bunny Stories. If you're here, maybe you know what it means to be sick in a house where no one believes you're sick. Maybe you know what it costs to doubt your own body because everyone else does. If this is your first time, hit that subscribe button. We tell stories here about women who learn to trust themselves again, even when the world calls them crazy. Here's my story. I found out on a Thursday. The Thursday before our 10th wedding anniversary, which Eleanor had insisted on hosting as a surprise at the country club where she'd been a member for 30 years. She'd been planning it for months, 10 years. "Nora, you two have been through so much. You deserve a celebration." She'd said you too, but she'd looked at Ethan. She always looked at Ethan. I was at her house that morning, helping her sort through table decorations she'd bought in bulk. She'd asked me to come. "I need your eye for color, darling," and I'd gone because saying no to Eleanor was like trying to push a revolving door the wrong way. It was easier to just step through. We were in her kitchen. The same kitchen where I'd eaten hundreds of meals she'd prepared, where I'd sat through Sunday dinners feeling like a guest in my own marriage, where the refrigerator was covered in photos of Ethan's childhood and none of our wedding. She was arranging flowers in a vase, her back to me, and I was reaching for a ribbon on the top shelf of the pantry. The apron fell. It was hanging on a hook inside the pantry door, the floral one she always wore when cooking, the one I'd seen thousands of times. It fell because I bumped it with my elbow, and when I picked it up to hang it back, something crinkled in the pocket. I shouldn't have looked. I know that now. Looking is what changes everything. But I was 35, I was exhausted, and some part of me, some small animal part that had been trying to get my attention for years, made me reach inside. There were pills, not in a bottle. Loose, wrapped in tissue, crushed into powder that stained the white paper a faint chemical blue. Dozens of them. And a small mortar and pestle, the kind you'd use for grinding spices, with residue in the bowl. I stood there holding them, and my body, my stupid, betrayed, broken body, knew before my mind caught up. The taste. the copper licorice tea, the almond smoothies, the soups that were good for my thyroid. 8 years of meals prepared with love, delivered with care, consumed with gratitude. I walked out of the pantry. I walked past Eleanor, who was still arranging flowers, who said, "Nora, did you find the ribbon?" I walked out of her house. I drove home. I sat in our driveway for 40 minutes and I let myself remember. The migraines started 6 months after the wedding. At first, they were occasional, once a month, manageable with over-the-counter medication. Then once a week. Then twice. By the time I was 27, I was having them 3 times a week, lasting 12 to 16 hours, leaving me curled in bed with a pillow over my head, unable to tolerate light or sound or the touch of my husband's hand. Ethan was patient at first. He brought me water. He rubbed my shoulders. He made jokes about how I was allergic to marriage and I laughed because it was easier than crying. But patience erodes. I watched it erode, the sighs that got heavier, the way he'd leave for work while I was still in bed, the comments that started as concern and became resentment. Maybe if you exercised more. My mother never had headaches like this, and she raised 3 kids alone. Have you tried just pushing through it? I tried. I tried until I was crawling to the bathroom to vomit, until I lost weight I couldn't afford to lose, until I was too weak to stand in front of my kindergarten class and had to quit the job I loved, the job I'd been good at, the job where small hands had reached for mine and called me Miss Nora with the absolute trust of children who don't know yet that adults can fail them. Eleanor was the one who suggested I take time off. Your health comes first, darling. The children will be fine. You need to focus on getting better. She said it while stirring a soup she'd brought over, something with lentils and turmeric that smelled like comfort and tasted like the slow accumulation of poison. I got better enough to try for baby. That was the plan: leave teaching, rest, get healthy, start a family. Ethan wanted children. I wanted children more than I'd wanted anything, more than I'd wanted my degree, my apartment, my independence. I wanted to build something that was mine, something that wouldn't leave, something that would look at me the way I'd looked at my own mother before she died when I was 12. The first pregnancy lasted 9 weeks. The second, 11. Both ended the same way: sudden cramping, sudden blood, sudden emptiness where there had been hope. After the second, I went to a specialist. They ran tests. Chromosomal abnormalities, they said. Bad luck. Nothing I could have prevented. Try again in a few months. Give your body time. I gave my body time. I gave it Eleanor's teas and Eleanor's soups and Eleanor's smoothies. I gave it 8 years. And now, sitting in my car with crushed pills in my hand, I understood that my body had been trying to tell me something all along. The headaches were warnings. The fatigue was a defense. The miscarriages were my body protecting me, protecting something that might have grown inside poison, might have been fed by the same hand that was crushing pills into my morning tea. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't weak. I was being killed slowly, carefully, by a woman who called me darling. I didn't confront her. That was the first decision I made, and it was the hardest. I wanted to. I wanted to march back into that kitchen and scream until the windows broke. I wanted to call Ethan and tell him his mother was a murderer, or as close to one as made no difference. I wanted to go to the police, to a doctor, to anyone who would listen and validate the horror I was feeling. But I'd been married to Ethan for 10 years. I knew how this would go. He would defend her. He would say she was old, confused, that she'd never hurt a fly. He would say I was stressed, grieving, imagining things. He would choose her because he always chose her, because Eleanor had spent 30 years making sure no one could get close to Ethan without going through her first, and because I'd been too tired, too foggy, too grateful for her help to see the cage until the door was locked. So I made a different plan. A quiet plan. A plan Rosa would have recognized, though I didn't know Rosa then. I only knew that if I was going to survive, I needed proof. Not just for Ethan, for myself. Because some part of me, the part that had absorbed 10 years of "you're too sensitive, you're too tired, you're imagining things," still doubted. Still wondered if I was making it up. Still flinched from the possibility that I was the problem, that my broken body was just broken, that Eleanor was innocent, and I was a monster for suspecting her. I spent 6 months becoming someone else. I bought a nanny cam disguised as a digital clock. I saved samples of every meal Eleanor brought, sealed them in plastic bags, labeled them with dates, stored them in a cooler in the back of my closet that I told Ethan was craft supplies, because he never asked what I did with my days. I made doctor's appointments in a town 40 minutes away, under a false name, and had my blood drawn weekly. I kept a journal, not a diary, a log with timestamps, symptoms, meals, everything, and I watched. I watched Eleanor in my kitchen through the camera I'd set up to monitor the oven. I watched her pull the tissue of pills from her purse. I watched her crush them with the small mortar she carried in a velvet pouch. I watched her stir the powder into my tea, my soup, my oatmeal, with the serene concentration of a woman performing an act of worship. She never hurried. She never looked around. She had been doing this for so long that it had become muscle memory, as natural as breathing. I watched her smile at the camera, at me, at the empty room, and I felt something die in me. Not love. I hadn't loved her for years, though I'd performed gratitude so well I'd almost convinced myself. What died was the last of my doubt. The last of my hope that there was some other explanation, some benign reason, some misunderstanding that would make this all okay. It wasn't okay. It would never be okay. But it would be true. The anniversary dinner was on a Saturday. Eleanor had rented the private room at the country club, white tablecloths, crystal glasses, a centerpiece of lilies that I knew would trigger my allergies if I still had them. She'd invited 30 people. Ethan's siblings, their spouses, Eleanor's church friends, colleagues of Ethan's who'd never met me because I was always under the weather. It was supposed to be a surprise. Ethan was supposed to be surprised. I was supposed to cry with joy and gratitude and the relief of being loved. I arrived early. Eleanor had asked me to help me with the final touches, darling. You have such a good eye. I said yes. I said yes the way I'd said yes for 10 years, with the smile that didn't reach my eyes and the gratitude that tasted like ash. She was arranging place cards when I walked in. She looked up and her face did something complicated, pleasure at my obedience, dismissal of my presence, the proprietary satisfaction of a collector displaying a prized acquisition. There you are, you look pale. Did you eat the soup I sent over? I did, I said. It was delicious. She smiled. The smile that had made me feel safe for years, that had made me feel childish for ever doubting her. Good, you need your strength. 10 years, can you believe it? I can't believe a lot of things, I said, and I walked into the kitchen. The country club kitchen was industrial stainless steel, already staffed with caterers preparing the meal Eleanor had designed. She told them she wanted to handle the dessert herself, a family recipe, for my son and daughter-in-law. They'd cleared her a station. A mixer, a counter, an oven. I had my own bag. I'd brought it in 3 days earlier, hidden in a storage closet, because I'd been planning this longer than I'd admitted to myself. A portable projector. A laptop. A folder of documents, blood tests, pharmacy records, the video files from the nanny cam, the sealed samples I'd had tested at a private lab that confirmed the presence of methimazole, a thyroid medication, in concentrations that would suppress function, cause miscarriage, induce chronic fatigue and neurological symptoms in someone with a normal thyroid. I didn't touch her dessert. I wouldn't poison her, that was her game, not mine. I was there to prepare something else. The guests arrived at 7. Ethan came in looking handsome and uncomfortable, the way he always did at Eleanor's events. He kissed my cheek, you look nice, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not grief. Just the spacious emptiness of someone who has already mourned a marriage while still wearing the ring. Dinner was served. Eleanor had planned a menu of my favorites, the foods she'd fed me for years, the ones that had made me sick. I ate none of it. I pushed it around my plate and watched her watch me, her eyes narrowing slightly when she noticed I wasn't drinking the wine she'd selected, wasn't touching the soup she'd supervised. At 9, she stood up. The room fell silent, the practiced silence of people who knew their cue. 10 years ago, she began, her voice warm and trembling with practiced emotion. My son brought home a girl who was too thin, too tired, too fragile. I thought, what does she have to offer him? But I was wrong. She offered him, she looked at me, and I saw the calculation in her eyes, the way she was measuring my pallor, my silence. She offered him the chance to be needed. And what mother doesn't want her son to be needed? Polite laughter. Ethan looked down at his plate. I looked at the projector I'd set up behind the dessert cart, hidden under a cloth. I've spent 10 years, Eleanor continued, caring for her, feeding her, nursing her through her, she paused, delicately, her difficulties. And tonight, I want to celebrate not just their marriage but the family we've built, the love that's sustained us. She gestured to the dessert cart. The cake she'd made, white frosting, 10 candles, the careful handwriting of a woman who had never let anyone else do anything important. But before we cut the cake, I said, and my voice was clear and calm, the voice of a woman who had rehearsed this moment in her dreams for 6 months, I have a presentation. Eleanor, you always say I'm too shy to speak up. Tonight, I'm speaking. I pressed the remote in my pocket. The projector lit up the wall behind her head. The first image was a still from the nanny cam, Eleanor in my kitchen, mortar and pestle in hand, the tissue of pills visible on the counter. The date stamp read 3 weeks ago. The room went quiet in a different way. The kind of quiet that happens when people realize they're not at the event they thought they were. That's Eleanor's voice cracked just slightly. That's a private home video. Nora, what are you? The next image. A pharmacy record. Methimazole, 5 mg. Prescribed to Eleanor R. Whitfield, filled monthly for 8 years. Next to it, my blood test results, thyroid levels suppressed, consistent with chronic ingestion of antithyroid medication. Then the video, the one I'd watched 100 times. Eleanor crushing the pills, stirring them into my tea, smiling at the camera. I stood up. My legs were steady. My hands were steady. My body, for the first time in 8 years, felt like mine. 8 years of migraines, I said. My voice didn't shake. 8 years of fatigue so profound I couldn't work, couldn't think, couldn't stand up long enough to teach children who needed me. 2 pregnancies. 2 miscarriages. 2 babies I never got to meet because my body was fighting a poison it didn't know was there. I looked at Ethan. He was pale, frozen, his eyes moving between the screen and his mother and me like he was watching a tennis match where the ball was on fire. The doctors said stress. I continued, anxiety, bad luck. My mother-in-law said rest, let me take care of you, and she did. She took care of me so thoroughly that I almost disappeared. I walked to the dessert cart. I looked at the cake, white and perfect and poisonous. I'm not going to eat this cake, I said. I'm not going to eat anything you make ever again. But I am going to leave this here. I placed the folder of documents on the table. For anyone who wants to know what care looks like when it's really control, what love looks like when it's really fear, and what a woman looks like when she finally stops being grateful for her own murder. I turned to Ethan. He was standing now, his mouth open, his eyes wet. Nora, don't, I said. Don't say my name like you're surprised. You knew, some part of you knew. You just chose not to look because looking would have meant choosing, and you never learned how to choose me. I walked to the door. The room was silent, the thick, suffocating silence of a family realizing their saint has blood on her hands. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I'd seen the look on Eleanor's face in the split second before I left, the rage, the terror, the dawning understanding that the weak, tired, grateful daughter-in-law she'd built had been a fiction, and the real woman was walking out the door. I drove to a hotel I'd booked 3 weeks earlier. I slept for 14 hours without a migraine. I woke up and I was still alive, more alive than I'd been in a decade. The divorce was final in 4 months. Ethan didn't fight it. He was too busy dealing with the fallout. The pharmacy launched an investigation into Eleanor's prescriptions. The country club revoked her membership. 2 of Ethan's siblings stopped speaking to her. The church food pantry asked her to step back after someone showed them the video. She wasn't arrested. Proving intent to harm rather than to treat would have required more than I had, and honestly, by then I didn't care about her punishment. I cared about my life. My body, which began to recover as soon as the poison stopped. My thyroid, which normalized within 6 months. My energy, which returned like a tide I'd forgotten could come in. I went back to school, not for teaching. I couldn't stand in front of children anymore without thinking of the ones I'd lost, but for social work, for the study of how families hurt each other, how women are silenced by the people who claim to love them, how poison comes in forms that look like care. And then I opened Nora's table. It's a small space, a converted Victorian house on the edge of the city, with a kitchen that's always warm and a living room with couches that have been cried on by dozens of women. I run it with 2 other survivors, a woman whose mother-in-law sabotaged her birth control for years, and a woman whose sister slowly stole her identity until she didn't know who she was anymore. We offer legal referrals, medical advocacy, and something harder to find, belief. The simple, radical act of looking a woman in the eyes and saying, I believe you. Your body is telling the truth. We have a rule. No one cooks for anyone else without asking. No one is taken care of without consent. No one's pain is dismissed as drama or stress or imagination. We eat together real food, prepared in front of each other with ingredients we can name. We are learning, slowly, to be nourished without fear. Eleanor is in assisted living now. Ethan told me once, in the only email he sent that I read before deleting. She has dementia, apparently. She doesn't remember me or the anniversary dinner or the 10 years she spent trying to erase me. I felt nothing when I read that, not triumph, not pity. Just the quiet certainty that memory is its own kind of justice, and that she will never know what she took from me, which means she will never have the satisfaction of understanding it. I know, I remember every day. I remember the blue dress with the daisies. I remember the taste of copper and licorice. I remember the two babies I never met, who exist in my body as absence and ache, and the stubborn refusal to let their loss be meaningless. I also remember the moment I walked out of that country club, the cool air on my face, the steadiness of my legs, the first breath I took as a woman who had chosen herself over the story she'd been fed, the story of gratitude, of weakness, of a sick woman who needed saving. I saved myself. It took 8 years too long, and it cost me more than I can articulate, but I saved myself. And now I spend my days helping other women do the same, because the poison isn't always in the food. Sometimes it's in the narrative, the one that tells you to be grateful for the cage, to thank the hand that feeds you while it chains you, to call control care and submission love. The antidote is your own voice, your own body, your own refusal to swallow one more bite of something that makes you smaller. I'm Nora. I'm 36 years old, and if you're reading this, maybe someone is feeding you poison and calling it love. Maybe you've been told your symptoms are in your head, your fatigue is laziness, your pain is drama. Maybe you've been so well taken care of that you've forgotten how to take care of yourself. Stop eating. Start watching. Start listening to the body that has been trying to save you all along. And when you're ready, when you have your proof, your plan, your steady legs, walk out. Don't look back. There are tables waiting for you where no one will ask you to be grateful for your own diminishment. See you in the next story.